been raining for like a week and the sun finally started to come out today. Hey everyone, my name is Emma and today I'm going to do my September TBR. I read 11 books in September and a lot of them were new releases and a lot of them I really enjoyed. It was a pretty good reading month. So since I read so many books, I'm just gonna get right into it. Oh, I'm not gonna do an October to be read because I made my fall TBR and a lot of the books I'm reading in October are books that I already mentioned in my fall TBR. So if you want to know what I'm gonna be reading in October, you can go watch my fall TBR and you'll see a lot of the books that I will be reading. The first book that I read was Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. Queen of Shadows is the fourth book in the Throne of Glass series. It's one of my favorite series. I love Sarah J. Maas. This book was not my favorite of the series. I had a lot of issues with it, but rereading it again was fun because I already knew what my issues were and I was able to just enjoy it for what it was. I reread Air of Fire and Queen of Shadows leading up to the Empire of Storms release because I just wanted them to be fresh in my mind, and I'm really glad that I did. With Sarah J. Maas's books, I pick up more and more each time I read them. Air of Fire and Queen of Shadows really prepared me for Empire of Storms and it made a lot more sense. If I had not reread them, I think I would have been more confused. Rereading it, I was just able to enjoy it for what it is. I had already formed my opinion and I knew what my issues were with it. I got to just enjoy it and that was really nice. Plus, reading Sarah J. Maas's books are always fun. Obviously, the next book that I read was Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. This is the fifth book in the Throne of Glass series. I was so excited looking forward to this book that I hardly slept. This is one of my favorite series. It's one of the series that got me back into reading YA because I read it when I was younger and then just didn't for a while. This one came along and everything started again. I was lucky enough to go to the release party and I got to meet Sarah J. Maas. I got my book signed. Oh, this is not my signed copy. My other copy is signed. If you want to hear me talk about that, I did make a video and a spoiler-free review, and then I also have a full spoilery book review for Empire of Storms. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I think it's my favorite of the series. My initial reaction was that Empire of Storms was my favorite, but as it sits, I feel like Air of Fire and Empire of Storms are so different that I like them both a lot, but I like them differently. But I really had a fun time reading this. It was very different from the other books in the series. It had this whole adventurous feeling to it that was just really awesome. My issues were kind of small things or things that I was expecting, so I really enjoyed it. I loved it so much. I love these characters. Yeah, you can't go wrong with Sarah J. Maas. After that, I read A Torch Against the Night by Saba Tahir. A Torch Against the Night is the second book in this series, following An Ember in the Ashes. I loved the first book when I read it. I think I read it earlier this year, and I was so excited for the second one. I really like these characters. I think that this world that Saba Tahir has created is really interesting. It's very brutal. A lot of the characters are in kind of the military. One of the things that this book had in an improvement to the first book is I loved Helene. Her chapters were my favorite, and I don't know if that's ever happened to me where kind of the off-side character whose POV we get is actually my favorite. I think she's such an interesting character and I'm so excited to see what happens to her in the future books. I was so looking forward to this book before it came out, but I waited to read it until after Empire of Storms because before Empire of Storms I was rereading Air of Fire and Queen of Shadows and I just didn't want to move into a different world and then go back to that world. So I put off reading this until after Empire of Storms. I made a mistake, okay? I didn't even give myself 24 hours after finishing Empire of Storms before starting this book. I was freaking out about Empire of Storms, and I don't feel like I enjoyed this as much as I should have. Even still, I really enjoyed it. My only complaint with this series, and I had the same thought when I read the first one, is that I wish more was accomplished in each book. It's a little bit slow as to what happens over the whole arc of each book. When you're reading it, it doesn't feel slow paced, like you're sucked in the whole time. I think because time-wise in this series, not a lot of time has passed, so it is more realistic than a lot of the YA books where it's like been 3 weeks and their whole life has changed and stuff, but I wish that more was accomplished. Anyways, I don't think you should let my reading experience impact whether you read it, because I think the only reason I didn't absolutely love this book is because I was still focused on a different book, and that's my fault. The next book that I read in September was The Graces by Eve Lar. This book was completely a cover by, come on. Oh, look at this cover. It's so beautiful. I saw it in the store and I was like, ooh, what's that? And then this happened and I had to buy it. Even though this was a cover buy, I really did enjoy it. Our main character, who I will call River, is new in this town. She's new to this school, and in this town there's this family who there's a lot of mystery surrounding. People think they might be witches. The whole time we're kind of left wondering what is real, what is not. It was very mysterious. I loved reading it in the fall. It got me feeling like fall was coming because I read it towards the beginning of September. It took a very dark turn, which I was not expecting, but I really enjoyed it. It got me out of my Empire of Storms reading slump, so for that I have to give it props. The writing is not incredible. There were some plot holes and things, but overall I really enjoyed it. It was an interesting read, not like anything that I read this month, so I really enjoyed that one. Next, I read Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. I have been slowly reading the Grisha trilogy after reading Six of Crows because I loved Six of Crows, and I just thought this author has a whole trilogy that I've never even read. I need to read it, so I did, and I loved it. So this is the last book in the Grisha trilogy. Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, and then Ruin and Rising. This world that Leigh Bardugo has created is so magical and so much fun. I just want to go live in this world. If you don't know anything about these, they're kind of set in a Russian-inspired world called Ravka, and in Ravka you have the normal humans and then you have the Grisha, and the Grisha kind of have magical powers, but it's almost scientific the way that their magic works. Our main character, Alina, believed that she was just normal her whole life, and then all of a sudden she discovers that she's a Grisha, and she's not only a Grisha, she's a very rare type. I think the books got better as they go. This one was definitely my favorite. I was spoiled for the ending, but in the long run I think it helped me because certain things with my ships did not go down the way that I was hoping they would. I was spoiled for that in the midst of reading the second book. So by the time I got to the end of this book, I had resigned myself. It was one of those things where now I've realized that the author did the right thing, even though it's not necessarily what I wanted. It wasn't what I wanted because the character who I wanted our main character to end up, I just liked him so much. Not necessarily because they would be the best couple ever. And that's not how you're supposed to read books. So I actually really enjoyed the ending. I'm totally satisfied, and the more that it sits after finishing this series, the more I'm convinced that the ending was really good. So, Leigh Bardugo, if you want to write that Nikolai trilogy that you've hinted at a couple times, I would be down for that. I would definitely be down for that. I want that. I want that trilogy, please. Next, I read The Crown's Game by Evelyn Skye. This is another Russian-based fantasy type thing, except this one actually takes place in Russia, and we follow these enchanters who have magical powers, obviously. In Russia, every generation, a new enchanter is born, and they become the enchanter for the crown. Every once in a while, two are born, and when that happens, they have to compete in the Crown's Game. I really enjoyed this book. I didn't have any expectations going in. The premise sounded really fun and interesting. Like enchanters fighting each other. It sounded like Throne of Glass, but with magic, and I was like, cool, that sounds awesome. I'm kind of obsessed with these Russian set fantasy books. Russia just has this really magical feel that lends itself to these stories. I love them. I'd never read one, and now I'm gonna like hunt them down and read as many as I can. Again, I didn't have any expectations, so I was just pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I read it. Next, one of my favorite books I read this month was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. I have been putting off reading this for a while because I just wasn't in the right mood, and then fall hit and I was like, now is the time to read this book, and I loved it. It was so good. I'm so excited to read the rest of the series that even though I have a big long pile of books that I was planning to read first, I might just drop them all and finish this. I loved our main character Jacob. I loved his internal dialogue. I thought it was hilarious. His pessimistic humor was my favorite. He's such a punk in the beginning, and I just thought it was hilarious. I loved Emma. She's so fiery. I was proud to share a name with her. I like this world. It's so interesting and complex, but it's not confusing. It was like the perfect level of creepy for me because I'm kind of a wimp when it comes to creepy books, creepy things in general, but this one was perfect because fall comes around and I want to read creepy things, but I'm not a horror book type of person. You've got magic romantic and historical fiction, and it's just really good. I would highly recommend it to anyone. I cannot wait to finish the series. I did go see the movie the other day. I enjoyed it, but I don't know. I have too many thoughts about that to really talk about here. While I was reading Miss Peregrines, I was also reading Furthermore by Tahira Mafi. I did not plan to read this author couple's books at the same time, but it was so much fun. They went together so well because this is so fun and whimsical, and Miss Peregrines is so creepy and dark and funny. I am a huge fan of Tahira Mafi's writing style, and I was really excited to read a middle grade book from her, and it didn't disappoint. I loved this one. It was another of my favorites I read this month. It's so whimsical and creative, just beautifully written. I do have a full book review for this one. If you want to hear what I thought about this book, you can go check that out. It was so lovely and whimsical and nonsensical. Alice, our main character, is a favorite of mine. She is very spunky and I loved it. And it was really refreshing to read a middle grade novel because it's been a really long time since I read a middle grade novel. So I liked it a lot. Then I read The Call by Peter O'Gillen. Ooh, this book was really creepy. It was like Hunger Games with the mutations times 10. Despite the fact that it was a little too much for me, it was really well written. This book takes place in Ireland, and I'm guessing it's kind of post-apocalyptic Ireland or post-government collapse or something. We don't get any history as to what has actually happened in the world. In Ireland nowadays, at any time in a kid's adolescence, they can be snatched up in the call, transported to this other world for a day, and they have to run from all these creatures and survive, and it can happen at any time. In our world it's only 3 minutes, but in their world it's a whole day, and they have to run from these like evil fairy elvish things named the Sidhe all over the country. All of these survival colleges have popped up. Kids train to survive, and the kids who do survive obviously are kind of traumatized. Our main character Nessa, I believe she had polio, so her legs are very weak, and nobody thinks that she can survive the call, but she's so determined to. That was one of the things I really liked about this book, was our main character. I so admired our main character. She was very strong and she did everything that she could. She was smart. One thing, I wish that the book was longer at the end because it takes so long to establish what's going on because it's so confusing. I needed a little bit more. I don't know if this is going to be a series. I kind of like it as a standalone. I don't think I'll read the rest of the series if it is a series. I did enjoy this. If you like disturbing books, you should read this one. The next book that I read was Three Dark Crowns by Kendra Blake. I was really looking forward to this book when it was released, and I really enjoyed it. The premise is super interesting. The world is really interesting. There's a lot of ceremony and traditions, which I found a little confusing. I wish we'd gotten some more backstory on why everything goes down the way it does, because on this island, every generation, royal triplets are born, and these girls have to kill each other to get the crown because they all have equal royal blood, but only one can be queen. And each of them has a specific magical power or specialty. So we have our one queen who is a poisoner, one who is a naturalist, the last one is elemental, I think. That I found very interesting. How this whole world works, how the magical system works was really cool. I am definitely going to continue this series when the other books come out. I really enjoyed it. I just wish we'd gotten a little bit more explanation. Again, I wish more had been accomplished in this one book. It kind of felt like the first book in a series. It needed some time to get us into the world, get us introduced. Sometimes I felt like we were getting too much information at once. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I loved the story and the characters, royalty and fighting each other and all these magical powers. It was just fun. The last book that I read in September was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This was one of my most anticipated books of this year. I loved Six of Crows so much, and this one secured this series as an all-time favorite. I don't understand how Leigh Bardugo does what she did with this series. One of those things being that we follow many different characters' point of views, and all of them are just as interesting as the other. There's no blah character who I don't like their point of view. I'm so emotionally attached to all these characters. Anyways, Six of Crows is a duology. The first one was a heist book, and we follow Kaz Brecker and his crew that he puts together to pull off this heist. It's so much fun. It takes place in the same world as the Grisha trilogy, but this one takes place like in a different country. I love Leigh Bardugo so much. I'm such a fan. She does it all in her books. Like, there's humor, there is character development, world development. They're so epic. They're just... My thoughts are still kind of scattered about this because I've just finished and it wrecked me, but I loved it. It's going to be one of my favorite books I read this year for sure. I will definitely do a full book review for this book, and once I do, I'll put the link in the description. This world that Leigh Bardugo has created, I could live in forever. I want to be friends with these characters. I want to be a part of the dregs. That's all I'm going to say about it. That's it for my September wrap up. I really enjoyed a lot of the books I read this month, and I'm really looking forward to October and the books I'm going to read. My favorite was probably Crooked Kingdom, although Empire of Storms doesn't even count because it's one of my favorite series ever. So I don't know. I guess I liked them both the same. I also loved Miss Peregrines and Furthermore, and I also liked the Crowns games. Let me know some of the books you read this month. I'm sure you read some of these new releases if you read YA. I'm Miss Emma Reads a Lot on Instagram and Tumblr. If you want to check out my social media, I'll put the links down below. And I'll see you guys soon with a new video. Let's see if I can carry all these books.